If you could only pick one martial art as your foundation before stepping into the cage, what would it be? I know these questions are subjective, and no single art is perfect, but after analyzing decades of UFC and MMA history, I think I finally have an answer. First, let's talk about the contenders, and why these martial arts are so dominant in their own lane. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the gentle art that shocked the world at UFC 1. Royce Gracie was tapping out guys twice his size, making it look easy. For years, people thought BJJ was the ultimate cheat code for MMA. Boxing. It is safe to say that boxing is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of striking. Dominant within its specialty, fast hands, and footwork that makes you look like you're dancing. No serious striker can afford to ignore it. Muay Thai. The art of 8 limbs. Elbows, knees, kicks, punches. These practitioners turn their whole body into a weapon. Just ask anyone who's eaten a Thai kick to the leg. Now, let's make the case for wrestling. See, after those early UFC days when the Gracies were submitting everyone, the metagame evolved. Fighters realized that to beat a grappler, you didn't have to be a better grappler. You just had to stop the fight from going to the ground. And who are the best people in the world at controlling where a fight takes place? Wrestlers. This is why wrestling exploded in the late 90s and early 2000s. It wasn't just that wrestlers were strong, it was that wrestling provided the single most important skill in a mixed rules fight: control. Control over position, control over the environment, and control over the fight itself. If a dominant wrestler wants to take the fight to the ground, they easily can. If they want to keep it standing and strike, their takedown defense is so good that they can sprawl and keep the fight right where they want it. This led to the development of sprawl and brawl fighting style. Now, before we get into the reasoning of why wrestling dominates every other sport, I would like to talk about our own app, JABAI. We all know nothing replaces physical training and a great in-person coach. But what if you need a second opinion at 2 a.m. or can't afford a personal coach for every session? That's why we built Jab AI, to be a second coach that's available 24/7. Think of it like this. Wrestling is all about control and analysis, breaking down an opponent's movements. Our app brings that same analytical, strategic mindset to your training. It generates personalized plans and guides you with expert, voice-based cues during workouts. Maybe you need to analyze a recorded sparring session to see why your takedown failed, or get instant feedback on your punching form during a solo drill. JABAI can do that. So, do give it a try. Available on both App Store and Play Store. Why wrestling dominates. First up, fight control. This is huge. A wrestler doesn't just react to where the fight goes, they decide where it goes. Every single fight starts on the feet, right? But the wrestler gets to choose if it stays there. They can shoot for takedowns whenever they want, or they can stuff your takedowns and keep it standing on their terms. Talk about playing mind games. Second, the judges love wrestlers. Look, I'm not saying it's fair, but it's reality. MMA judges consistently favor the guy on top, the guy controlling position, the guy landing takedowns, and 9 times out of 10, that's the wrestler. Khabib Nurmagomedov set the single fight takedown record with 21 takedowns in one fight. 21. That's not luck, that's wrestling dominance. Third, the conditioning factor. Man, if you've ever been around wrestlers, you know these guys are built differently. Their training is absolutely brutal. They're used to grinding through matches, cutting weight, competing multiple times in a day. Plus, have you ever seen a boxer wrestle a literal bear? Fourth, competition experience. Most wrestlers start young and compete constantly. By the time they're in their early 20s, they've already had hundreds of high-level competitive matches. Compare that to a striker who might have had 20 amateur boxing matches, or a BJJ guy who competes a few times a year. It's not even close. Now, before you think I'm completely dismissing the other arts, I'm not. BJJ is absolutely crucial. Once the fight hits the ground, you better know what you're doing down there. Guys like Charles Oliveira and Damian Maia have shown that submissions are still fight enders. But here's the problem. BJJ alone isn't enough anymore. Pulling guard doesn't score points in MMA. You need to get the fight to the ground first. And that's where wrestling comes in.
Striking is essential too. Anderson Silva, Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya, these guys prove that elite striking can absolutely work. But notice what happened when Conor faced Khabib? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Even the best strikers in MMA today train wrestling defense religiously. And yeah, judo and karate have their place. Ronda's hip tosses were a thing of beauty, and guys like Machida showed that traditional martial arts can work with the right game plan. But again, these tend to be supplementary skills built on top of a grappling foundation. I know it doesn't seem to be the sexiest answer. AS wrestling isn't as flashy as a head kick knockout or as dramatic as a last-second submission. Plus, the best MMA fighters today aren't just wrestlers. But the key is that they build on a wrestling foundation. They learn all those other martial arts to have a competitive edge, but wrestling is the base that lets them do it all safely and effectively. I think it's safe to say that wrestling indeed is the strongest foundation for MMA.